But thank you all for being here. I'm going to be brief on comments and then answer any question we can as time allows. But talk a little bit about Ukraine. We were talking here at the table that Vladimir Putin has got to be fuming right now, because when he thought about massing troops at the border, he had planned out this concept that he was going to obtain air superiority within about 48 hours and take all the ground he wanted to take within about 10 or 12 days. That's publicly reported now. He massed troops at the border, many of whom had no earthly idea why they were there, and the majority thought they were there for exercises. He thought that NATO was in a position to where it would be difficult to get any sort of coordinated and swift response. He thought that businesses would not take a look at doing business in Russia and wondered whether or not that made sense, given what's going on there. And he was wrong on all those points. He was also wrong that he could mobilize a military force effectively, even with just basic supply chain issues becoming readily apparent and visible on television. I do believe the sanctions that we put into place were smart. I'm thrilled to see that the Chancellor lived up to what he suggested he was going to do when I had dinner with him about 4 weeks ago. I love the fact that Germany is putting $100 billion more in their defense budget, and they're committed to the 2% contribution to NATO. I like the way that we are speaking with one voice. We have to work on additional things that we could do for Ukraine in support of President Zelensky. I also should mention he also fully expected that President Zelensky was going to turn tail and run, which would have made it easy to destabilize things. And that was probably his greatest miscalculation. We were on a Zoom call with the president on Saturday morning, and I was just struck by his resolve and how that galvanized Ukrainian, Ukrainian people. The question is where we go from here. You know, we're talking about possible MiG fighters being transferred. There are a lot of things that we could do that are even short of that we have to consider, and maybe even that. But I do think that at this point, if NATO continues to execute, and I think that they will, if other nations around the globe continue to limit Russia's ability to fund this war by relying on their energy, I think at some point either he will have to make a decision to just take it for what it is, an embarrassing defeat, or have to answer to the Russian people who are going to suffer through this process as well, and leadership in the Kremlin trying to decide, is this something that they can really contend, the leadership of Russia continue to look to Putin as being that leader. We'll see how it plays out. I do think that we should implement secondary sanctions. I do think that we need to put pressure on the administration to actually be honest about energy production in the United States. For an administration official to say that there are some 9,000 leases, all we need to do is have the energy do, what they've been approved to do. We know that that's nonsense. We know they've snapped back waters of the U.S. We know that there are a number of things that are in place that would not make any business person make a decision to invest billions of dollars with all the uncertainty that we have in place today. But why on earth we're taking off the most powerful weapon that we have off the table, and that's our energy weapon, our energy superiority over any other nation, is just absurd to me. So hopefully, as this goes on, I hope it ends quickly. I don't think it will. I don't think we're talking about a matter of weeks. I'm not even sure we're talking about a matter of months. We could be talking about a matter of years before this fully plays out in Ukraine, and hopefully doesn't expand into other potentially non-NATO countries in and around Ukraine. Difficult situation, but we're going to continue to focus on it. With respect to the Bitcoin. Let me go back and talk about a little thing that y'all may, some of you, particularly if you're in the financial services sector, are following. It's the current, and I can actually weave it into a sort of bipartisan theme too. We boycotted the banking committee when Senator Brown was going to try and box us and force us to mark up all of the nominees. 5 of those 6 nominees we're prepared to mark up today. And Sherrod Brown's well aware of that. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to get enough votes to get out of committee, but they can be discharged if we have a split on the committee. But Raskin is a real problem. She's not only a real problem based on her record, she's a real problem for the supervisory role on the Fed. I mean, what a sea change from Quarles to Raskin. So we've got a problem with the responsibility she would assume. We've got a real problem with questions that she won't answer on 36 different occasions. Now, I don't know about you all. How many of you have had a job offer over the last 10 years? All right, at least one. Do you remember the circumstances of it? Like, kind of roughly what the offer was, who maybe recruited you to it, and the circumstances of it was? Then isn't it fair to say if it happened 3 years ago, you'd remember? Given that you were in a Fed position and now you're going to go work for a financial institution that at one point didn't get a charter approval and then did get an approval. I mean, wouldn't that just kind of like come to mind? I think it would. But now to weave it into the bipartisan part. We were on the floor. I don't know what it was. I'll give you 2 examples. On the day of the day that the Democrats wanted to nuke the filibuster, I noticed Joni Ernst running around with this book, and she was kind of tentatively going up to people and asking them to sign it. I said, "What is that?" She said, "Well, I got a nephew named Charlie. He's got a project called Flat Charlie, like Flat Stanley. And he's got a project where he's trying to get some members of the Senate to sign the book." I said, "Give me the book." And I mean, we're over there beating the heck out of each other on you're destroying the Senate, everything else. All that's really going on the floor. And I'm running around with this book saying, "Sign the book." And it's like, Sherrod Brown signed the book. Bernie Sanders signed the book. Elizabeth Warren, please sign the book. But, over the course of probably 45 minutes, I got like 50, 55 signatures on a bipartisan basis. That was going on. That was going on while we were literally taking on a weighty subject. But even more recently, it was the day after the boycott. I've been working on the LIBOR transition, which fortunately got in to the omnibus. But before that, I was still making sure that Sherrod was on board. I went up to him. He said, "God, you boycotted the committee." I said, "I'm sorry, Sherrod. I had a prior commitment." He said, "Well, what was the commitment?" I said, "I committed to Toomey. I was going to boycott the committee." And he laughed. I said, "Now that we're past that, we're okay with LIBOR, right?" He said, "Oh, yeah, let's go talk to Tester, make sure that we get it done." So it's just another example where that stuff happens. You really do have to work hard to be a partisan hack here. Some people do it really well. It takes a lot of work ethic, but I'm not one of them. Because at the end of the day, people that do that don't get a bipartisan infrastructure bill passed, which actually, in my view, is why Build Back Better didn't pass. A hyper-partisan bill that would be very problematic if it got implemented versus a bipartisan bill that will have an extremely positive impact on the United States. You wouldn't necessarily be able to go across on my side of the aisle and get 29 members to vote for the postal reform bill, which is actually an important bill that enables a highly competent postmaster general to probably for the first time in our lifetimes has a legitimate shot at really putting the Postal Service on sound footing. There are a few things in there I'd like to have in it. Didn't get it, but I think we got a good, strong vote. Now I'll go back to the Bitcoin. Cryptocurrency is something that I think over time we're going to have to figure out a way. It's here, it's going to stay, and it should be here. And if you have any questions about that, ask somebody who has a PhD in cryptocurrency who bought, I think, 1 Bitcoin or 2 Bitcoin at $600, however long ago that was, and that's Senator Lummis. I mean, she is truly an expert in cryptocurrency with a vested interest. But I think we've got to figure out how it interplays with our financial systems, the movement of capital, and a number of other things, as we move forward. The real risk here is we don't want to overreach on regulation, but we have to have questions about what makes sense over time and make sure that we educate our members so that they understand the consequences of getting it wrong. But with that, I'll happy to answer any questions about that. If I can't answer the question, I will get my staff to answer the question for me. I don't normally travel with this size of a posse. I guess it's a little bit different given the setting.
They're always welcome. I'm just so glad that we could feed you guys.
Yeah.
They don't get it. And most importantly, your staff emulates you. And I just have to say one more time, I mean, your staff, your interest is their interest, and they don't have their own personal agenda. And Angela is one of the all-time best folks out there. And I just want all of you to know, she returns phone calls, emails. She will see you on the steps, and she doesn't look through you. She looks at you. And it's just, you're just the personification of what a great staffer is all about.
She is my second wife.
Yeah.
And if you have any doubt about that, ask my first wife.
Yeah. Emily Weems, you did such a great job with your intro. You get the first question if you would like to.
I would just say thank you on my work. I will be back to you on some others.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're glad to get
All right.
Oh, by the way, I came right from here for a meeting with the Supreme Court Justice nominee, Judge Jackson, just FYI. But I had a lot of fun with that because I'm probably different from most of the interactions she had with other offices and my staff. My staff are great. I'm not an attorney. I'm a business guy. I told Mitch that when he wanted me to be on judiciary. I said, I don't know if the right person for it. He said, I want a business person on judiciary. But just because I got there and from time to time I stay at a Holiday Inn, I don't think I'm an attorney. So as we're getting ready for the discussion with Judge Jackson, I got all my smart attorneys, including my chief of staff, who was 6 years as one of the counsel for nomination for Judiciary Committee. They're asking me all these really good questions, or telling me these are the good questions. But we get in there, and I had probably 6 of my staff in the room. I said, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then I'm going to have these people that wanted me to ask you questions. So guys, get ready. And so we had all my, including somebody that's interning with us right now, getting a chance to ask somebody who's a potential Supreme Court justice nominee, get a question asked. It was a great discussion. I learned more from seeing the interplay and enjoyed doing that. She's actually very impressive. In the President's State of the Union address, after what I think was a warm bipartisan reception to what he said about Ukraine, I wish that he had continued in that vein in a way that says inflation is real. Don't dismiss it. Don't pretend that energy prices are only going up because Putin invaded Ukraine. Understand that we've got some structural problems that we need to fix. Now, the Fed's going to go about and do 1 to 1.25% aggregate interest rate increase over the next 3 or 4 meetings of the FOMC. The balance sheet's going to come down. You've got some people that are hawkish on accelerating that. I think we're going to see that. But there are so many things that are affecting it. It's not like you can go back and say, what we need to do is implement the strategy that worked, insert a time frame, because it's very different. And what's going on in Ukraine even takes another level of complexity. But I think that the president would have done well to say, we got to work together, we got to fight together, we got to figure out how to do it. And if I were the president's speechwriter, I would say we have to get domestic energy production back on track and provide certainty to make sure that is something that also has strategic value beyond the immediate value of reducing the cost of energy. We should be talking about policies that make sense, that encourage businesses to come back to the United States, like getting endless frontiers, America Competes, worked out and implemented. But the reality is a lot of people are suffering. A couple of weeks ago, it was 2 weeks ago Monday, I was taking a ride down memory lane through the trailer park that I grew up in Nashville. I went to visit my mom. And my brother and I decided right over there. I go over there just about every time, just see how things are going. And, to have a Secretary of Transportation say the best way to deal with these rising energy prices is to get an electric vehicle. I didn't see a charging station in that trailer park. In fact, I didn't see many cars that have been manufactured over the last 10 years in that trailer park. To say that people aren't suffering, people are suffering. People like my family 40 years ago find themselves in the same situation, and in some circumstances even worse off than we were back in 1977 and 1978. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. So I think that it would be good to say, put Build Back Better aside. Let's talk about things that stimulate growth and get people back to work. Let's figure out why we have 7 to 8 million jobs still open. It's great that we have new entrepreneurs and other business activity, but we have businesses that are suffering and are at risk of going out of business. Let's figure out and deal with the thorny subject of, even when we get those 7 million people back to work, we're not going to have enough workers in the United States across the spectrum. Highly skilled workers and low skilled workers. So let's figure out better policies for guest workers, welcome more people into this country to work, contribute to our economy, and still touch base back at home. Let's talk about the real problem that we have at the border with 4 times more crossings last year, 2 million between February and December than the year before, and likely to have about the same number here. Let's talk about rising crime and how we can work together and get rid of the defunded police nonsense, which most people probably regret they ever tried to make that brand stick, and get back to something that really addresses safety. Let's figure out how people can gain back some of those wage gains that have all been lost to inflation over the past year and a half. Let's work together. Now, I would answer that call, had that been the call. And there were other people that say, well, let's not do that until we get the White House or the Congress. It's immoral to take that position in my mind, with the suffering we see right now.